My name is Matt McClinnick. I am interviewing Dennis Edward Scott. The date is August 12th, 2016, and we are in Pendleton, Indiana. Dennis is my stepdad. He's been my stepdad for several years, so he is also a veteran of the Vietnam War. So we're going to be talking today about that. But before we talk about that, where and when were you born, Dennis?
I was born in Indianapolis, Indiana, June 23rd, 1942.
And who were your mom and dad?
My dad was Claude Scott, and my mother was Martha.
And where were they from, McCordsville, or?
Yes, we lived out in the country, but just south of McCordsville. My dad was a farmer. My mother was a school teacher after us boys got in school ourselves.
Okay. Speaking of your brothers, how many brothers do you have?
I've got 3 brothers. One older and 2 younger than me.
Okay. Were any of them in the military?
Yes, my oldest brother, Bruce, was in the Army around 1961, 62. And I was in the Army. I was drafted in 1964. And my younger brother was in the Air Force.
Okay. So, before you joined the Army, what were you doing? Who was Dennis Scott before you were in the military?
Well, I was working for a construction company. We built power lines. I was a lineman. Basically, that's the only thing I ever done.
Okay. Around Madison County, or?
Yes. I worked for 35 years for Anderson Power and Light.
Had you worked with Anderson Power and Light before you went to the military?
No.
So before that, you were working with this construction company?
Yes.
Okay. And how old were you when you went into the military?
22 when I was drafted.
Okay. And you served in the Army.
Yes.
You were drafted. Now, I come from a generation that didn't have to worry about the draft.
Yeah.
What was that like? I mean, at a young age, late teens, early 20s, I imagine a lot of guys in that generation, that was something that they thought about, being drafted.
Yeah. Personally, myself, I wasn't thrilled about it.
Yeah.
But I made the best of it.
Yeah.
I felt you could either make the best of it or be miserable.
Yeah. Did you know other guys that maybe you went to school with or worked with that had been drafted?
Well, yes and no. Yes, but I wasn't close with them.
Okay.
The one guy that I remember that we went to Indianapolis at the same time to take our physical. And he didn't make it. He didn't pass his physical.
Mm. So, walk me through that. I mean, again, I don't know anything about the draft. I never had to worry about that. So, you get drafted, what do you get, a piece of mail?
Yeah. Got a notification in the mail that I was to report to up at Anderson at I think it seems like we went to the post office
Hmm.
in downtown Anderson, and they put us on a bus and took us to Indianapolis.
Wow. What?
We basically all we took was toothbrush and our shaving stuff to shave with.
Yeah.
They give us our physical, and the ones that passed the physical, we went to Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri.
Oh wow.
Never come back home until after our basic training.
Do you remember when you were drafted? Do you remember like your parents' reaction?
No, not really. I'm sure they wasn't thrilled about it.
Yeah. Now by 22, were you out of the house?
No, I was still living at home, but working construction. I was gone all week and come home on weekends. So, it wasn't anything new for me to be away from home.
Yeah. Okay, so when you show up to Indianapolis as a 22-year-old farm boy, when you got there, what was the demographics of the other guys there? Were they younger than you, or were they?
Some was younger, because I think some of them was probably enlisted,
Hmm.
and most of us probably were drafted, but there were some younger than me and some older.
Yeah. Okay, so you get to Indianapolis and you go to basic training in Missouri. Tell me about basic training.
It's a new awakening. It seems like that no matter what you do, it's not right. But that's just part of it.
Yeah.
Seems like we was up by probably 4 o'clock in the morning and didn't go to bed get in until 9 or 10 o'clock at night.
Was there any part of you, I mean, thinking of myself, if I was ever in that situation, I'd be scared to death. Was there any part of you that, when you show up to boot camp or maybe, or basic training, when you start doing the daily routine and all the exercising and the getting shouted at or just being away from home, was there any part of that just scared the living daylights out of you?
No, not really. Because I felt I'd been out really basically on my own, even though I was still living at home.
Yeah.
And I felt I was in pretty good physical shape. I didn't have any problem doing the physical part of it.
Mm-hmm. Were there other guys in your, what was the name of the group? I mean, was it a battalion or?
It was a company.
Okay. So were there other guys in your company that didn't handle basic training like you did? Maybe they were a little homesick or scared?
Yes, and some of them wasn't in the best physical shape.
Yeah. So in the era of Vietnam, being at basic training, knowing, were you certain that this was just the beginning of you being deployed and going to Vietnam, or was that not necessarily guaranteed?
Well, at that time, I don't even remember of Vietnam being discussed.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. After basic training was over, I got to come home for a couple weeks, and then I went to Fort Bliss, Texas, at El Paso.
And what was in Texas?
A lot of sand. I was in the Signal Corps, and that's where a lot of signal people went.
Okay.
And I was only there for 6 months. I went there in January of 1965. And in June or July, I got orders to go to Fort Riley, Kansas. It was a 1st Infantry Division.
So you go to Kansas, and is this where your lineman background starts to come into play in the military, or not yet?
Well, no, at Fort Bliss, Texas, I mean, I was in a signal company, and down there at Fort Bliss, we went out in the summer in maybe May, because it was hot, out to White Sands Missile Range. And we built probably 20-mile of telephone line.
So that's 1965.
Yes.
When do you go to Vietnam?
September of 65.
Okay. So the summer of 65, you're training in Texas and then Kansas.
Yes.
September of 65, you go to Vietnam. When did you find out you were going to Vietnam? And what was that like?
It was a little scary. I think just for the fact that not knowing what we were going to get into.
Now, by September of 65, have you heard of the conflict in Vietnam and heard bad things about it? Did you have negative, feelings about it?
We still didn't know a whole lot about it.
Yeah.
We basically knew where we was going, and that's about all.
Okay.
Because we were one of the first ones over there.
So you knew where, but there was no why.
No.
There wasn't a lot of why you're going there.
No.
And there wasn't a lot of your guys asking why either, I bet.
No. And the people that knew wouldn't tell them.
Yeah.
If they knew.
You weren't at that level
No.
to know. Okay. All right. Okay, so you get to Vietnam in September of 65. Where? Specifically in Vietnam, do you know for sure?
Well, I went over on a ship, and we pulled in at Saigon. And in the 1st Infantry Division, their headquarters was at Zion, and that is sort of southwest of Saigon. I'm not sure, maybe 20 or 30 mile. And from there, I was at a small village, and then we was outside the village of Phu Loy.
Okay.
And seeing the way those people lived back then was a real eye opener.
Yeah. Well, it's a third world country, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It's hard to explain, but I mean, they didn't have anything.
Yeah.
Lived in grass shacks, you might say.
Mm.
No electricity, no running water.
Did being stationed there, did you experience a lot of the same stuff? I mean, did you go without that kind of stuff, or
No, we had electricity. Of course, we were sleeping in tents.
yeah?
But we did have electricity because we generated our own electricity.
Yeah. So, the climate. What was the climate like there? I mean, in every movie you ever see it, it seems like a jungle climate,
It
hot and humid.
basically it is hot, humid. You could just sweat, not doing anything.
Yeah.
Probably the closest thing around here to it would be like down in southern Louisiana in middle of August.
Yeah.
And then in the fall, it seems like it was maybe November, October, November. You had monsoon season.
Yeah. So it rained pretty much
Just
every day.
Rained all the time.
Okay, so once you get to Vietnam, what's it like on a daily basis? I mean, are you doing, are they sending you out doing things? I mean, what was your specific role when you were over there?
It would vary. We would run telephone lines to places that needed communication.
Mm-hmm.
We would have guard duty to do every few days. And if something happened and someplace lost telephone communication,
Mm-hmm.
we had to go out and fix it,
Okay.
find out what the problem was.
Now, that job, did that require you, again, to be some of the first people through certain parts of Vietnam? I mean,
Yeah.
running telephone line, I imagine, did you see a lot of combat, or?
No, personally, I didn't see any really combat. We never went out on patrols.
Okay.
And the communication lines that we run was just on our compound.
Okay.
And if they would use radio signals to get communication from one place to another,
Okay.
away from our compound.
Okay. So you running telephone lines didn't necessarily put you in harm's way?
No.
You're staying on compound doing
Yeah.
that. Okay. Was there ever a time while you were in Vietnam where you felt like you were in danger?
Well, yeah, a couple times because we got hit with mortar fire at night.
At night?
Yes.
Wake you up?
Oh, yeah.
Tell me about that.
Well, it's scary at the time. The one time we got up and our one round hit close enough that we had holes in our tent.
Oh wow. That would scare me.
It didn't last long. Maybe a minute or less, and it was over.
Hmm. What about the second time?
It was about the same. The other time, the second time, it wasn't anything real close to our tent, but it was always at night.
Yeah.
Because at night was the best time for the VC to move around.
That element of surprise.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But we had Vietnam women that would come on base. I mean, they was cleared to. They would do our laundry for us.
Hmm.
So I mean, you know, people like that, you really didn't have to worry about.
Yeah. Well, and there was a certain part of the Vietnamese population that wanted the United States there. I mean, they
Yeah.
they wanted the help. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, speaking of women, did you see any children there as well? I mean, was there any interaction with kids from Vietnam? I mean,
No, we didn't really interact with them. But I mean, you seen them in the streets
yeah,
in the daytime.
yeah. So, how long were you in Vietnam? September of '65 to when?
For 1 year.
September of '66.
Left in September of '66.
Okay. So, when did you find out you were getting to leave?
We pretty much had our calendar marked.
You,
We knew ahead of
you
time.
were counting down the days.
We knew when we went in there that it was
a
going to be
year.
for 1 year.
Okay. So when that day came, you're marking down the days. When that day came, what was the feeling among your group?
We were glad to get out of there.
Yeah.
It's hard to explain how you feel,
Yeah.
but you're definitely glad to leave.
When you left, did you feel a difference in Vietnam from September of '65 to September of '66? Was there a change in the relation between the United States and Vietnam? Were things starting to escalate? What did you feel like you left it the same way you found it, or had
Yeah,
something changed?
as from where we were at, I felt that we left it like we found it.
Okay.
Because you know, we didn't get told a lot of stuff of how things were going.
Yeah. So, did you get on a plane to come home? Did you get on a ship to come home?
No, we came home on a plane.
Okay. Did you come straight back to the States? I mean,
Yeah, I think our plane landed in Guam, but we never got off the plane. They probably took on food and fuel, and from there it was nonstop to San Francisco.
okay. Did that plane ride seem long?
Very long.
I imagine.
I don't know, it seems like now 15 or 16 hours maybe.
Okay. Now, you hear these stories about Vietnam, vets coming back to the States and, running into protesters. That's what you see in movies or TV shows, and that certainly did happen, but what was your experience coming into San Francisco
I never had any of that experience, but I know it happened. But personally, myself, when we got there, we was taken, and they tried to, the ones that were getting out of the service, they tried to talk us into staying.
Mm.
And I didn't want any part of that. So I got discharged out. They took me to the airport, and I got on a plane and come home. I didn't stick around San Francisco to do sightseeing.
Yeah.
Or anything like that.
I don't blame you. I'd be ready to go home.
Yeah, I was ready to come home.
So, when you were in San Francisco, did you feel like you were home already? I mean, you were back in the United States, but did it really feel like home yet?
Well, no, I can't say it felt like home.
But when you got back to Indiana?
I felt it. It felt good just to being in the United States.
Yeah.
There was that element that you didn't have to worry about someone dropping a mortar on your
Yeah.
tent at night.
Yeah. I mean, you live like that for a year, and then all of a sudden that's not an issue anymore.
Yeah.
I imagine that was a big weight off your shoulders. So when you get back home to your mom and dad, were they happy to see you?
Oh yeah,
That's good.
Yeah. And I was home for probably, I was home probably for a month before I ever went back to work.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Got some time off, yeah.
I just took it easy for that amount of length of time.
Yeah. So, I guess coming home from a third world country that you lived in for a year, what things did you have a new appreciation for once you were home?
Oh, you appreciate everything. Not not living in a tent,
Yeah.
and just the luxuries of being back in the States.
Yeah. I imagine indoor plumbing
Well, yeah,
is
running water and
yeah.
everything. And you being 22, 23 years old, you don't realize how well you've got it until you see how some of the rest of the world lives.
Yeah. Most of the rest of the world.
Yeah, that's right, most of it.
Yeah.
And people here in the United States, probably a lot of them would have a hard time believing it,
Yeah.
that people live that way.
So once you're back home, and because you were in Vietnam so early, you know, in the timeline of that whole conflict and that war, you were there at the beginning, really.
Yeah.
Toward the beginning. Did from your living room, watching on television or maybe listening to on the radio, were you following the conflict in Vietnam after you were there, or were you not interested since you lived it?
I was interested, but I didn't follow it all that close.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't.
So I imagine, like you said, you didn't know how they were going to feel about the fact that you were in Vietnam. In Indiana, though, in the late 60s, was there a lot of anti-Vietnam movement? Or is that something that would have been more like West Coast and East Coast?
I think it probably was, because I never seen any protest or anything around
Yeah,
central Indiana.
yeah.
It might have, and I just never seen it.
So, as a vet, as a Vietnam vet, someone that lived there for a year, someone that experienced it firsthand, how did you feel about people protesting the war in Vietnam? I mean, I guess there was two different kinds of protests that come to mind when I think of Vietnam protesters. I think of people that were against the war, and then there were people that were against the troops. I mean, there were certainly both of those.
Oh yeah,
I mean, I think we can both agree that against the troops, that was silly and really shameful.
yeah. And I didn't feel that people should have been protesting the war.
You didn't.
I thought it was wrong. And I definitely thought it was wrong for him to be protesting against the soldiers.
Sure, yeah. Now,
Because
yeah, why did you think that it was wrong to protest the war?
I think that, this is just my opinion, we was just trying to prevent the spread of communism.
Mm. Yeah.
And I guess and we know the government don't always make the right decisions, but that was something they said, and I felt especially with me being drafted, I should go and do what they wanted.
Yeah. And especially your situation being over there, not as someone in combat, but someone running telephone lines. You know, you're not over there killing people.
No.
You're not necessarily over there on a daily basis having people trying to kill you. Happened a couple times with some mortar attacks, but for the most part, it sounds like you were there to help out people in a third world country that couldn't help themselves.
Yeah. You know, we put a lot of money into that. Well, like where we were at, there at Phu Loy, we bought ice from a local person there that made ice.
Hmm.
So we was helping their economy
Yeah.
in a small way, but
And it sounds like you had a friendly, relationship with the Vietnamese where you were.
yeah, for the most part it was.
Which, in my opinion, that's some of the best diplomacy and best advertisement for the United States is when troops are
Yeah.
sent overseas and they're not always just firing guns. They're there to help people.
And like in the daytime, if we go into town, We didn't take our rifles or anything with us.
Yeah. Huh. Okay, so, here you are 50 years later. This is
Yeah.
what, the 50th anniversary of you coming home, right?
Yeah.
50 years later, are there things about your time in Vietnam or your time in the military in general that have stuck with you throughout your life?
Yeah. I think my work ethic, I think, sort of comes back from military training. Uh, and just, I think maybe appreciating the finer things.
Yeah.
Because when you're in the military, any branch of service, you learn to be on time for things.
Yeah.
And a lot of people today, it seems like they don't have that kind of, if they're on time for something, it's just by chance, I think.
Is there anything about your time in the military, maybe specifically your time in Vietnam, is there anything that you wish would have gone different? Maybe a better question is, if you could go back in time and avoid the draft, meaning not, dodge the draft, but if you could do it different where you didn't get drafted, where your name didn't get picked, would you rather that be the case, or would you rather go to Vietnam for a year?
Looking back on it, I don't think I would change a thing. I'm not sorry I went. I mean, at the time, I wasn't looking forward to it,
Yeah,
but I'm not sorry.
yeah,
And I know that a lot of people will not agree with what I'm getting ready to say, but I think they ought to have the draft today.
Hmm.
I think that might be a lot of problem with kids today. They don't have no discipline in their life.
Yeah,
And I don't see anything wrong with drafting women or girls.
mm-hmm. Yeah, it seems like it changed you as a person, but I feel like it had a good effect on you.
Yeah, and I think that goes back to making the best of a bad situation.
Yeah,
Or it could have been a bad situation if I'd have maybe taken a different route, but
yeah, yeah. Is there anything that I haven't asked you that you'd like to talk about?
no, I think we pretty well covered about everything.
Well, I appreciate you doing this. I also, I know that hopefully you know this, but as your stepson, I just want you to know I appreciate your service. I appreciate, even though I didn't know you in '65, I appreciate that you did that, and
Well, thank you.
that was not an easy thing that you were asked to do by your country, and you did it.
No. And something else that I don't, to this day, I will never feel that it was right. guys going to Canada to avoid the draft.
Yeah.
I just, if there's anything that I'll never understand, and that's it. I think it was wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, again, thank you for sitting down, and thank you for your service, and
You're welcome.
you did great.
Thank you.
Okay.